Welcome back. According to Yelp, nearly 160,000 restaurants have closed permanently due to the pandemic. In an effort to help aid those businesses impacted by this crisis, the Independent Restaurants Coalition has been fighting for Congress to push the Restaurants Act of 2020. Joining us now to discuss is Will Guidara, founding member of the Independent Restaurants Coalition. Will, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First things first, for those who are not familiar, please tell us about the Independent Restaurant Coalition and your mission.
The IRC, as we've come to call it, started right at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis with a few phone calls between some different restaurateurs acknowledging that this was going to be particularly tough on our industry. And while we've had, as an industry, the restaurant business has had the NRA, the National Restaurant Association, lobbying on our behalf, we came together to lobby on behalf of independent restaurants specifically. And what started as a few people on a Zoom call has turned into a coalition of people representing 500,000 restaurants across the country, 11 million people that work in those restaurants. And we're just trying to do whatever we can to bring awareness to our specific situation and try to encourage people in DC to give us the relief we need to get through this.
Right. And as we know, Will, restaurants have taken a huge hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now outdoor dining is coming back here in New York City. However, there has been indoor dining is coming back here in New York City. However, there has been outdoor dining for some places. Yet that still hasn't helped a lot of restaurants. As you say, you represent independent restaurants. What is the difference between those smaller restaurants, the independent restaurants, and other restaurants?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of independent restaurants out there who just simply don't have the corporate backing that results in enough cash on hand to suffer through a time like this where revenue is so dramatically decreased. I mean, you look at New York City. Okay, so we've had takeout and delivery, and depending on where you're located, perhaps there's some good patio seating opportunities. And now, September 30th, we're coming back with 25% capacity. But the reality is you can't afford to operate at 25% or in other parts at 50% capacity when we still have to cover 100% of our overhead. And so we're just in a really, really challenging place where, listen, everyone that I talk to understands that we need to be responsible, and opening at 100% right now maybe doesn't make sense, but we can't have our industry be the most impacted by this crisis and, while endeavoring to be responsible, not receive some relief to offset the challenging situation that we're in.
Right. And Will, when we talk about the impacts that restaurants have made in employment opportunities as well in the industry and the economy, can you just give us a little bit of background on that as well?
Oh, for sure. I mean, okay, the restaurant industry nationwide is a $760 billion powerhouse in the US economy. I mean, it comprises 3.5% of the entire GDP. Independent restaurants specifically employ 11 million workers directly, but we support the livelihoods of over 5 million others through the supply chains, whether we're talking about the farmer, the producers, the winemakers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It's a key driver of economic opportunity. We employ more employee managers from marginalized communities in our industry than any other industry. We employ 1 million single mothers. Nearly 40% of restaurant workers are between 16 and 24. And these are jobs for so many people that if some relief isn't given to our industry, it's going to take a really long time for them to come back.
Right. Thank you, Will, for sharing. Let's discuss the current state of the restaurant industry. Thousands of restaurants have closed due to the pandemic, and many more are at risk. As I said in the beginning, most recently, a Yelp study said that 60% of those restaurants are gone for good. They won't be coming back post-pandemic. The IRC recently stated that restaurants have been the hardest hit industry during COVID-19. Can you share more about the impact this pandemic has had on restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why we're hit the hardest, right? We rely almost exclusively on people coming together in person. And we heard, even when it was said, the CDC not too long ago said that, I mean, restaurants, you need to take your mask off to eat, right? And so just situationally, we're in a position that is least beneficial to handle something like what's going on. But yeah, I mean, the reality is this is not a time when there's a lot of money out there to help people bridge the gap until when revenue returns to normal. I mean, our industry is already down 2.5 million jobs since the outset of the pandemic, meaning that 1 of 4 jobs lost from this entire thing has come from restaurants and bars. I think we're on pace to lose as an industry something like $240 billion in revenue this year, which won't only result in a ton of restaurants closing, but the ripple effect, as I said before, to the farms, the wineries, the manufacturers, transportation. I don't think people have fully kind of grabbed onto how damaging this will ultimately be if something doesn't change.
Right. Now, Will, in order to continue fighting to save independent restaurants, your coalition has been pushing the Restaurants Act 2020. Can you tell us more about this act, what it is, and who it will help?
Yeah. Okay, so we came up with this, and we've been talking about this for months. I mean, the PPP program was available to everyone out there, and it was a helpful part of restaurants getting through this. Although 2 things: 1, a lot of smaller operations were unable to get a PPP loan because they didn't have a close banking relationship, and 2, most of the people that did get those loans, they're running out right now. The Restaurants Act is an industry-specific bipartisan bill. It was introduced in June by the Mississippi Republican Senator Roger Wicker, the Oregon Democratic Representative Earl Blumenauer, and it puts aside a $120 billion revitalization fund for small restaurants and be managed by the Treasury. The grants would be available to any small business, which means that you can't have more than 20 of the same operations. So you can't have a big chain of restaurants. It would be specifically for people that own less than 20 of a single thing. And the idea is for the first 2 weeks, grants would be prioritized for women, veteran, minority-owned and operated businesses with smaller revenues, so that we don't make the same mistake that's been made in the past, where some people don't have access to the grants while the big companies scoop them all up. The idea of it is, we think of it, listen, one of the things that people say about restaurants is that the margins are low, that 90 to 95 cents of every dollar goes right out the door. I think that's one of the reasons why we should be saving restaurants, because it doesn't just help restaurants. It helps all the businesses and the millions of workers up and down the supply chain that benefit from restaurants. In fact, when we introduced the bill, over 215 small businesses not in the restaurant industry sent a letter to Congress endorsing the act.
Wow. And now, Will, what legislative level is the Restaurants Act in now? Do you believe that this act can be passed in time to save struggling restaurants?
You know, I mean, we've received a ton of support and a ton of co-sponsors. In the last few days alone, 12 new senators have signed on, including Democrats, a Republican, and an independent. And I mean, I think right now at this moment, we have 40 senators co-sponsoring the act, 195 representatives co-sponsoring it. And so we have momentum. And listen, I wish this had been passed a month ago, because a lot of places that have closed wouldn't have had to. And it's tragic when you think about the loss, not only economically, but culturally to our towns and our cities. That, I mean, restaurants are the central gathering places for these towns and cities. That said, it's not too late. It just needs to happen soon. Because every day that passes where people out there running restaurants don't have some sort of understanding of what's coming next, more and more and more people are going to be throwing in the towel. And those are decisions that cannot be unmade.
Right. And how can people learn more about the Independent Restaurant Coalition, the Restaurants Act, and why should they support today?
Well, everyone is welcome to join the movement. Just go to saverestaurants.com. You can sign up. We'll keep you abreast of everything we're working on. We'll cue you in and tell you where you can help. And why? I mean, I guess everything I've been saying. If you want to protect millions of jobs, if you want to help sustain the contributions that restaurants have on the economy, but perhaps more than ever before, I'd like to think, I've been a restaurateur my entire life. It's the only thing I've ever done. We're in the business of serving others. We get out of bed so excited to help people celebrate one of the most magical moments of their lives, or sometimes even give them the grace to forget the difficult moments of their lives. We've always endeavored to say yes, and right now we need others to serve us so that we can continue waking up and serving you in return.
Thank you so much, Will, for your time today. And I hope that everything turns out well. We have your support as well. We will be posting this on our
Thank you.
webpage everywhere to get the word across about this incredible act that may save many restaurants in need during these tough times. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. I appreciate it.
Again, folks, to learn about the Save Restaurants Act 2020, you can visit saverestaurants.com, follow independent restaurants on Restaurants Coalition on Facebook, follow on Instagram and Twitter at INDP Restaurants. We'll be right back.